Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us on the phone, we have JP Lee. He's a product manager over at VanEck. We're going to take a look at video games and eSports. They're breaking the internet, and there is a way that you can get exposure to that. JP, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for making the time. And unprecedented markets, first quarter of 2020 certainly lends to more video game activity, that's for sure.
You know, it's been a crazy first quarter, and I think what's surprising a lot of people as we just ended the quarter is the fact that a lot of these video game companies, video game stocks held up very well, and some of them are even up for the year. So I think it's surprising for a lot of people, but there are some big trends occurring behind the scenes that are kind of driving that worldwide engagement.
All right, let's take a look at that. On our first slide, video games, eSports, breaking the internet. What are you looking at here?
I think the biggest news story that's come over the last 2 weeks is the NASCAR races that were broadcast live. So these are essentially the drivers themselves are racing in simulator rigs, and they're racing the live race. It's on TV, but they're all racing basically from their own homes. So back-to-back weekends, the race was broadcast live on Fox, and it broke the world record for esports TV broadcast 2 weeks in a row. So one of the interesting things about this is the fact that of the people who tuned in, 25% had never watched a real NASCAR race before. So I think NASCAR really opportunity for them to bring in new, and we could just go right around the horn here. So it's not just esports that are really doing well. Video game engagement and people are playing video games at record levels. So there's a website called Steam. It's basically a platform that people use to play games with each other and themselves. So Steam is also doing the same type of thing. It's breaking records back to back to back. And I think one of the most recent ones was 22 million people playing video games at the same time. You see it on the platforms, and you see it in the individual games too. Activision launched a new game, Call of Duty Warzone. It's very important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a 15-year-old IP. So the Call of Duty series has been around for 15 years, and you've got 30 million people playing within the first 10 days. So Activision has been able to capitalize on the game's popularity, and they're still running with it. And I think the second thing to note here is that it's a new business model. So the old business model is game as a product, where you buy a game, it's a one-time transaction. This is a free game. It's a game as a service game. So basically anybody can go online, download this game, and play it for free, and then Activision will make money through in-game purchases. So it's more like a subscription model. And then finally, there's a game called Counter-Strike Go. It's another 20-year-old game, and it's breaking records for itself too. It had 1 million players on at the same time. You got to remember, this is a 20-year-old game. And so what we're seeing here is huge engagement on video games, huge engagement on esports, and these games are not flashes in the pan. Popular games can stick around for decades.
All right, moving along to our next slide here. Part of the attractiveness of this sector is that the video game publishers are actually well diversified.
Yeah, so these companies have historically been able to use new technologies to basically push product, and these consumers are hungry for the next new thing, right? So people who play video games are interested in technology. And they want to try the virtual reality headsets. They want to try the augmented reality games. So mobile games is a great example of this right here on this chart. Mobile games account for the majority of global video game revenue streams. The mobile games weren't around 15 years ago. So this is an example of video game companies realizing that this is a nascent technology. They're gonna leverage it, and they're going to push their games onto people. I've mentioned briefly the game as service model. That's another thing that a lot of games are really embracing. I think Fortnite is the most popular example of that. You know, Fortnite made $2.5 billion in 2018. It was the most money that anybody had a video game ever made. And it's a free game. Anybody who wants to play Fortnite, they can go play. Esports is another thing. It's not on this chart, but esports is another way that publishers are basically diversifying their business. So by launching their own leagues, publishers are effectively owning the majority of revenues in the esports ecosystem. So they own the league, they own the game, and they own the media rights, which are projected to be the largest revenue stream for esports. So when a 16-year-old kid, he wins $3 million playing Fortnite over the summer, that makes front page news. It's in the front page of the Journal. It's in the front page of the New York Times. And every kid and young adult in the world says to themselves, look, I can do that. I can I can win the Fortnite World Cup. And what do? They go online, they download the game for free, and then they're engaged and they're hanging out with their friends, and then they're doing these smaller in-game transactions, which ends up to be a lot of money.
All right, let's wrap up with our final chart here. And you're seeing strong domestic demand in emerging markets. And then also, how do we get exposure to this through ESOP?
Sure. So the VanEck Vectors video game and esports ETF, the ticker is ESPO, trades on the Nasdaq exchange. It has a basket of global stocks, and I think that people kind of are aware that this is a worldwide phenomenon. But when you look at the individual holdings, there are these companies like Tencent, C Limited, and Bilibili. There is a lot of strong domestic demand from within the emerging markets countries. So traditionally, emerging markets economy it's import export, it's commodities, it's things like that. These companies are benefiting, profiting from their own citizens, their own consumers. So Tencent's the elephant in the room. It has some sort of a stake in any popular video game company in the world. The majority of the revenues are from China, but it's also a global company. They own League of Legends. They own a minority stake in Epic, which is the company that made Fortnite, and they even have a stake in Activision. And you can see them pushing their games into these emerging market countries like India, for example, which a game called PUBG is very popular. They're making millions and millions of dollars from Indian consumers. C Limited is another great example. So C Limited is a Singapore internet and mobile platform, specializes in online gaming. Their revenues come from Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. So their most popular game is called Garena Free Fire, and it just reached 60 million daily active users. So you think about that. There's 60 million people are logging on some form every day to play this game. And then finally, Bilibili. It's a Chinese online entertainment company. It's a website. It's kind of like YouTube. So they have live broadcasts and user generated content, and it has a lot of mobile games. So that company has done pretty well this year. So this is just 3 little snapshots of different companies that are exposed to the emerging markets countries. But it's very exciting to see. This is not just in the U.S. It's not just in Europe. It's not just in China. It's everywhere. And there are a handful of companies that are really doing well and profiting from this phenomenon.
All right, JP, appreciate the insight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, and thanks for joining me on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.